call the June 12th, 2018 council meeting to order. I'll ask the clerk to call the roll, please.
Dr. Lee,
Here.
Ms. Walden,
Here.
Ms. Shinholster,
Here.
Mr. Reynolds,
Here.
Mr. Mullins,
Here.
Mr. Chambers.
Here. We have a quorum present. Before we stand, I would like to mention that Mayor Copeland is under the weather. I would ask that you please keep her in your thoughts and prayers and for a speedy recovery. Talked to her earlier this morning. I'm sure several others have, and she did not sound real good. Sounded pretty weak. So hopefully she'll be moving along. If everyone will please stand and join me in prayer and pledge of allegiance. As I'm known for, I want to change something up, and I'm not going to say a prayer. I'm going to ask everybody that they observe a moment of silence. There are three things that I'd like for you to think about: world peace, an end to hunger and starvation, and an end to divisiveness. Take a moment. Thank you. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Council, you have received a copy of the May 22nd, 2018 council meeting minutes. Are there any corrections or deletions or any discussion? Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve?
So moved. Second.
I'll ask the clerk to call the roll.
Dr. Lee,
Aye.
Ms. Walden,
Aye.
Ms. Shinholster,
Aye.
Mr. Reynolds,
Aye.
Mr. Mullins,
Aye.
Mr. Chambers.
Aye. Keeping up with this and voting at the same time is going to be a task. I can tell that already. Been doing this for 17 years. First time I've ever conducted the meeting. I don't like it in this seat. It does sit up a little bit more. The minutes have officially been adopted. We have two public hearings to conduct tonight. The first public hearing is to consider an ordinance 1805-005, amending the Land Development Code to allow a special use of 1075 North Columbia Street. And the second is to consider ordinance 1804-003, amending the Land Development Code, making a text amendment temporarily imposing a moratorium on a multifamily and planned development rezoning and fraternity and sorority and the group resident overlay. The procedure for conducting these hearings is to amend the Land Development Code will be as follows. Number one, once it has been determined that this public hearing has been properly posted and advertised, the clerk will read the proposed amendment to the Land Development Code. Number two, we will then hear a report from the Planning and Zoning Director, including the advisory decision of the Planning and Zoning Commission. Council will first hear from the applicant and anyone who wishes to speak in favor of the amendment. We will then hear from anyone who wishes to speak in opposition to the amendment. If anyone speaks in opposition to the amendment, we will then give the applicant or anyone else an opportunity for rebuttal. But the rebuttal must be limited to the points or issues raised by the opposition. Please make sure that before you speak that you give your name and address for the record. First public hearing we have to consider tonight is ordinance 1805-005 that amends the Land Development Code to allow special use of 1075 North Columbia Street. Has this public hearing been properly posted and advertised?
Yes, sir, it has been.
I'll ask the clerk to read the ordinance by caption.
An ordinance amending the ordinance passed and adopted on the 10th day of December 2002, known as the Land Development Code of the City of Milledgeville, Georgia. Ordinance grants a special use for the property located at 1075 North Columbia Street. The special use is for automobile sales.
Okay, I will recognize the zoning administrator for a report to include the advisory decision of the Planning and Zoning Commission.
This was unanimous to approve for the car lot.
Well, that's quick.
That was, yeah.
Okay.
Kind of quick.
All right, is the applicant or anyone else present who would like to speak in favor of the amendment?
Good day. Tim Thomas, 1898 Timberlane Road, Milledgeville, Georgia. I have two of my interns here that does some intern with me, and I would like to ask for you all to approve for them to present this request.
Any objection? Don't see any.
Okay? Have it. I answer any question after they finish.
Good evening.
Good evening. Would you please state your name?
I am Aaliyah Taylor, and I live at 129 Pine Drive, Northeast in Milledgeville, Georgia.
Okay.
I currently attend Baldwin. I am an upcoming senior, and I am an intern for Mr. Thomas at Otis Thomas Construction.
Good evening. I am Bryce Thomas of 701 Wild Grape Drive in St. Mary's, Georgia. I am a graduate of Camden County High School and will be attending Westminster College on scholarship to study architecture.
We are here today on behalf of Davis Thomas Development at 1075 North Columbia Street, which is our property of interest.
And on behalf of Mr. Tony Haven and Haven's Automotive. Mr. Haven has been in automotive for over 30 years and currently operates on 917 North Wilkinson Street, Suite 7.
The opportunity for Mr. Haver to relocate to a highly visible location has surfaced. We are here today seeking your support and making this endeavor into a reality.
That's it.
Okay.
Questions?
Is there any questions from council?
Not, is Mr. Haver here?
Yes, ma'am, he is.
There is.
Oh, there you are. Oh, okay. Well, is he going to speak as well?
That's up to him. Yes, ma'am, he can.
I was just,
Address, yeah.
okay, I was just noticing from the diagram that you just identified them as parking spaces. So, I was just wondering, when you say automotive sales, where are the cars?
But if you look at you see this site plan right here, this is a typical conceptual layout.
Mm-hmm.
All your layout is within code and to zone ordinance.
Mm-hmm.
You have your ADA parking space, and you have one space for the owner and a space for the customer.
Okay.
The other 4 spaces would be utilized for on-site display.
Okay. And the cars will be back there where the existing home is?
No, okay. This property is the green layout here, which is the entire property that we own.
Mm-hmm.
You have Haver's Automotive would be here on the front commercial lot,
Okay.
well, commercial structure. In the rear, we own this little 2-bedroom home. We have 1 occupant in it as of now. This is their driveway and access here to the home.
Okay. Okay.
We have additional space as well if that's an interest. And as of today, we have a verbal commitment to purchase this lot next to it, this adjacent lot here, and in case we need additional parking space.
Okay.
Any further questions, council? Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak in favor of the amendment? Is there anyone present that would like to speak in opposition to the amendment? additional questions from members of council?
I do have a comment,
Okay.
not a question. To the young man and the young lady, you did an excellent job. Thank you.
Okay, this concludes the presentation of evidence in this matter. Members of council, you have heard the ordinance and the evidence presented. Do I hear a motion on the amendment?
Motion, we approve the decision of the Planning and Zoning Board and approve the rezoning.
Second.
Okay, is there any further, we have a motion and a second, is there any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll ask the clerk to call the roll.
Dr. Lee?
Aye.
Ms. Walden?
Aye.
Ms. Shinholster?
Aye.
Mr. Reynolds?
Aye.
Mr. Mullins?
I have to stand because I'm related to one of the owners.
Mr. Chambers?
Aye. Motion carries. Second public hearing is to consider ordinance 1804-003, making a text amendment to the Land Development Code, imposing a temporary moratorium, suspending all applications for multifamily residential and planned development rezoning, and temporarily suspending all applications for fraternity, sorority, and group residence overlays. I will ask the clerk to read the ordinance by caption.
An ordinance amending the ordinance passed and adopted on the 10th day of December 2002, known as the Land Development Code of the City of Milledgeville, Georgia, for the purpose of imposing a moratorium temporarily suspending all applications for multifamily residential rezoning and planned development rezoning within the City of Milledgeville, and temporarily suspending all applications for fraternity, sorority, group residence overlay, and group residence special exceptions within the City of Milledgeville's historic district for a period of 6 months and for other purposes.
Okay. Has this public hearing been properly advertised?
Yes, sir, it has been.
Before we get started, I want to mention one thing, and that is that in speaking in opposition or speaking for this amendment, that you will be addressing council, and that I ask that you direct everything in this manner toward us, and that there not be any discussion in the audience. Any discussion, I will call it down. We want to try to keep everything focused on who is speaking at that point in time, as well as being able to listen to any comments or questions from council. I'll recognize the zoning administrator for a report to include the advisory decision of the Planning and Zoning Commission.
Okay, this is the temporary moratorium, which will be extended for 6 months, and it passed the Planning and Zoning Commission with a 4-2 vote.
Okay. Any questions for Ms. Graham? Thank you. Is there anyone present who would like to speak in favor of the amendment? Surprise, surprise. Come ahead.
Did you notice I come with very little material this time, so I'll make it very short. I want to thank the council for the opportunity to come and speak on this issue, and particularly I want to thank the council for bringing the subject to the table, because I think it is very important at this point in Milledgeville's growth that we address the situation that we've seen come about. And no doubt from the ones present that it is a divided audience. There will be some in favor and some against. You just have to look around the town to figure out that we have grown significantly, both in unit housing and both in student housing, legal or illegal. Not here to issue that. Plus, I will not address specific issues because I don't think that's important for this forum. I think what is important is that we see that it's time that the council be given the opportunity to relook its codes. Now, I know the current code was in 2002, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think 2002. And what we've experienced in town has been so significant from 2002 until now that I think a relook is absolutely needed to see where we're going to go after we see where we've been. We have a golden opportunity to look at some other communities that have a large college population and how they handle the problem. Council does need time. I don't think anyone would debate that. Council does need time to look at the issue, and that time would be spent to reevaluate the current code. It would also need some updating. I don't think anybody here knows what the end result's going to be. I know I would like to see an end result. I know that there are ones in the audience who would like to see a different end result, but no one knows. The fact is, as we read the ordinance, the word temporary came into vote several times. This is not something that's permanent. This is something that's temporary only to allow the council members to say, well, what we've got in effect isn't working. Well, what we have in effect is working. What we have in effect needs tweaking. What we have in effect needs enforcement. That's what this 6 months is for. It isn't about individual properties. I will address individual properties if you ask me the question. I don't mind doing that at all, but that's not the issue here. It is to allow the council to overlook the overall essence of the codes to find out if we're on the right track. There has been a significant amount of building within the city, and I think that's very evident. I think we're at the point now where many have seen that we may or may not, and again, you're going to find out in the 6 months whether we're at the saturation point or not. I think we may have been there, and what direction we're going to go after we take a look at what we've done so far. We've got to take a look again at where we have been and what we want for the city. This is not particularly about me as a resident, though it will affect me. This is not particularly about realtors, who it will affect in the short term. It may help in the long term, but it will in the short term. Property owners. As a property owner myself, I don't want people to tell me what I can do with my property, but that's the essence of life. That's what you have codes for. I want the city council to be able to say, this is what we want for the city. It's for the benefit of the individual, and it's for the benefit of the individual's neighbor. And that's what you're going to address in the 6 months. Again, we don't know what's going to take place. Not addressing individual properties, addressing the code. And that's what you're going to do. I hope it's passed. Again, I want to, at the end, say thank you for bringing the issue to the table, because I think it needs to be addressed. I think we've discussed this before with specific properties. I'm glad you're taking a look, or going to take a look at it for the entire city, not just the historic district. It is also important for those who understand, and I think the council probably understands more than anyone else, this does not affect the business district. It does not affect commercial property rezoning. It does not affect O&I rezoning. This is just residential, which has caused the problem or the significant growth over a number of years. And I do appreciate the time it's going to take. With the monumental task of looking at the code and finding out what you can and cannot do with it, what needs to be done, it's going to take you 6 months. It's going to take you 6 months. So I say, do the moratorium, take the time, come out with a product that satisfies the residents, the realtors, the developers, the community. So I'm in favor of the 6 month moratorium. And I'll entertain any questions you may have. That was easy. Thank you.
Does anyone else like to speak in favor of the amendment?
My name is Virginia Knapp. I live at 517 West Hancock Street, and I would like to definitely in favor of taking the time to reevaluate where you want to go as a city, as a downtown historic district. I live right in the middle of it. We purchased in 2008, so that's next month will be 10 years that we've owned this property. I've seen significant changes over the time that I've been there. I've watched one neighbor after another leave and turn over to college housing. Not against it, not against it. I think we can coexist. But it just, I agree with Colonel Alston that it's a good thing to take the time to look at how things are, because this amendment is from 2002. That's 16 years ago, right?
About that.
Years ago.
Mhm.
Change is good, and I think just seriously reevaluate where we're going. Consider your citizens, consider your neighbors, people that actually live down in this area that's in question. These ordinances were passed by city council members such as yourself for a reason. I think it would be just enforce what you have or rewrite what you have. And that takes time. This ordinance was amended in 2013. That's 11 years. That's a little bit of time to make a change. So maybe in 2018 you can make another change, but give it a little bit of time to. But I'm definitely in favor
Okay.
of the moratorium. I think it's a good thing for everybody. Questions?
Any questions? Thank you, ma'am.
No, I'm writing a note, but
Anyone else? Anyone that would like to speak in opposition to the amendment?
Good evening. My name is Matt Ressing. I live at 2171 Flat Rock Road in Watkinsville, Georgia. I'm here tonight representing Richard Sims, who lives at 330 West Green Street here in Milledgeville. I'm speaking in opposition to just one part of the moratorium. The moratorium has two parts. One deals with new apartments and multifamily rezoning. The second part deals with group use in the historic district. And I'm only speaking in opposition to the second part. One of the first things I'd like you to consider is the legal standard for passing a moratorium. As a governmental body, you cannot pass a moratorium just because you feel like it or just because you want to see what happens. There are rules that you have to follow. And this is the rule set out by the Supreme Court of Georgia. First of all, the moratorium has to be in the interest of the general public, not in the interest of a particular class. You can't do it to please a small group of people. You have to do it for the benefit of the community at large. And secondly, you have to establish why you're doing it, the purpose. And the means of the moratorium have to reflect that purpose. So you have to tell us why you're doing it, and you have to convince us that what you're doing will achieve that purpose. Would you mind just advancing the slides for me? Thank you. As I mentioned, I'm here on behalf of Richard Sims. You're all familiar with his work. I'm not going to go over everything that he's done, but he is well known for taking historic mansions and renovating them. And these are just 4 examples of his work, including his personal residence. We've been before you many times. You've seen his plans in detail. His work is immaculate. This is not in dispute. Even his opposition has admitted repeatedly that he does excellent work. Next slide, please. Not only is he taking these 200-year-old buildings and giving them another 200 years of life, he is enhancing their safety and health of the residents. So we looked at some of his exteriors. Here are some of his interiors. Not only is everything picture perfect, restored, using the historic brickwork, using historic plaster, picture rails, more importantly, he is updating them with modern conveniences for health and safety. He puts a $10,000 fire alarm system in most of these buildings. He's installed sprinkler systems in many of these buildings. Most of them had no insulation, had no central heat and air, had poor, dangerous wiring. He has replaced all of that in these buildings. These are beyond code requirements. And I believe that the Planning and Zoning Office will back me up on that. Next, please. He also hires local workers. So the tradesmen, or the tradespeople, I should say, that do his work are sourced locally. Every time you've approved one of his projects, local people in Milledgeville get work. Next, please. So we're here tonight to talk about this ordinance. And as I said, I'm not here to object to Section 1. This deals with new apartment complexes. I understand that's a concern for the city, and I'm not here to speak against it. However, the moratorium has a Section 2, which is weirdly specific. It says, no fraternity, sorority, group residence overlay, and special exceptions in the historic district. The reason this section is so strange is that there is only one person who is doing this work and has done this work for the last 2 years, and that is my client. So I've heard from the city that this is not targeting Richard, but in effect it is. He's the only one that's asked you to do this. Next slide, please. And here is the list of the projects that he has applied for. The other thing I want you to notice is that you have approved every single one. It's not like he's coming to you with projects and you're denying them and saying, why does this guy keep coming back? Every single one of these projects, you found they have merit and you approved them. In fact, the last two, 310 West Green Street and 200 South Liberty Street, we asked for the overlay. That means that we have permission to come back and present a special use application. You gave him permission. You said, fine, Richard, come back and tell us what you want to do with these homes. He still has not been able to come back because the moratorium was passed and prevents him from finishing his application on these two homes. Next slide, please. Special use permits are a very important tool and not one you should get rid of or suspend lightly. First of all, none of this happens overnight. As you know, this is a 3 to 4 month review process for every single application. There are 2 public hearings on the topic, and people who are opposed to it have every opportunity to speak out against it. You have the opportunity to ask questions. You can request changes to the special use application. And here's the important thing. When you apply for special use, you have to say, here is how many occupants are going to go in this home. You have to disclose that. Nobody else does. You have to allow annual fire and code inspections. Again, something that's not required of any other owners in the historic district. And you have to provide off-street parking. So these special use permits really solve 3 of the problems that other people are complaining about. We know exactly how many people are in these homes. We make sure that they are fire and code compliant, and we make sure they have off-street parking for all residents. Next slide, please. Special use permits are not the problem. They are a solution to the real problem, which is that we are losing historic homes in Milledgeville. We're losing them to neglect. We're losing them to the bulldozer. We're losing them to fire. This is a historic home that was demolished by GMC for a parking lot. Okay? They didn't do it to be mean. They did it because these homes are not economically sustainable to upkeep. GMC, Georgia College, they are not bound by your zoning ordinances. They can do this whenever they feel like, and there's very little you can do about it. We want to save these homes and put them to good use. Next, please. We also want to protect them from fire. A lot of these old homes have substandard electrical systems that need to be replaced or fixed. This was 201 South Liberty Street, not one of my clients' homes, but right next to several of these homes. It caught fire a few years ago. Okay? Next slide, please. We've seen what happens when these Hart Pine buildings go up in flames. This is the Sparta Courthouse. I'm sure you all remember. It burned so hot that the elevators melted. Imagine this happening in the middle of the historic district. We would lose our irreplaceable housing stock, and even worse, we might lose human lives. Next, please. You don't have to travel further than down the street to see this demolition by neglect. This was a roof that caved in a few days ago. It was collected rainwater that led to it, but this is why we need regular maintenance of these homes and buildings, and we need to incentivize the property owners to keep them up. There were 3 people in this building when it collapsed. Fortunately, they were all fine. Next, please. So the question I want you to ask is, why is this Section 2 in the moratorium? What justifies it? Why is it there? I want to point out that we had the P&Z hearing last week. No one spoke on behalf of the moratorium. There was not a single citizen that came forth during the public comment period to support this moratorium. The city planner has been doing studies of this topic, and he has provided the city with some of his findings so far. He does not recommend a group use moratorium. So if you'll take a look at the research he's done so far, none of that research supports that we need this in historic downtown. In fact, his recommendation to council was that you consider possibly expanding the overlay and allowing more group housing in the historic district. He's also mentioned some of his efforts to work with the college, and he stated that they've been successful. And in fact, it's easier for the college to regulate this student housing if they know who's in it, and if these fraternities and sororities that are there are part of a national organization that can be held accountable. So why is the city doing this? What is its justification? They've only provided one, and this was through open records request, and that is that there have been past complaints, okay, from residents of the historic district. But these complaints are from a very small group of people. You know them, you've seen them before, okay? But are you going to allow a small class of people to dictate the entire city's policy? And if so, why? Next slide, please. These complaints are directly relevant to the issue because they are the city's only justification for this historic district moratorium. So let's look at these complaints. It's a small group of complainers. This is not for the public benefit, it's for the benefit of a few. If you look at their past complaints, and I've reviewed them all in public hearings, most of them are unrelated to Richard's homes. They have problems with other houses, but not Richard's. And in fact, Richard has an excellent record of keeping his properties clean and quiet. I am confident that the planning office will back us up on that. If there's ever an issue, he solves it immediately, and his properties are among the nicest, quietest, and cleanest in the city. You may have heard a lot of complaints from people, but how many of the complaints have actually been filed with code enforcement? How many of those complaints have they actually provided evidence to support? Very few. I've reviewed all the files of code enforcement, and actual complaints about student behavior or zoning violations in the historic district are very few. And every single one made against Richard's homes was determined to be baseless. He has never once had a violation on any of his properties, and he now manages, maybe 10 properties in the area. Next, please. I understand the city has a concern, and it may be a reasonable concern, that we don't have affordable single-family housing in Milledgeville. And they ask you to identify areas where we can put that affordable single-family housing. But Richard's homes are not affordable single-family housing, and they never can be. Why? They're huge. These are homes that are 400,000 square feet or more. They are incredibly expensive. Okay? These are the oldest and largest homes. They cost over $300,000 to buy. Taxes and insurance an additional $11,000 a year. They're terribly inefficient. Some of them have plumbing running up the outside walls. Very few of them have insulation or central heating and air. The utilities in these homes are $1,600 per month. Okay? And if you actually want to do the renovations like Richard is doing, that will cost you $100 or more per square foot. So think about whether it is realistic that single families are actually going to invest in these houses. And the history says no. Next, please. I'd like to address the issue that the students don't belong in the historic district or are somehow invaders of the historic district. And I want to remind you that Georgia College, established in 1889, is in the middle of the historic district. It is literally squarely in the middle of this district. And students have lived here there for decades. In fact, many of these students lived in grandfathered apartment complexes. What that means is that prior to the code saying no more than 3 unrelated people, someone took some of these historic homes and chopped them into apartment buildings. It's not what my client does. He doesn't approve of it, but it was done many decades ago. And those living arrangements are now grandfathered. It means that you can't change that. And there is nothing you can do with a moratorium or at the end of a moratorium that's going to prevent that from happening. Okay? Students and young people living in groups are part of this neighborhood's characteristic. It's not new. It's been going on for some time. They are residents of our city, and they deserve the same respect. A moratorium is not going to change this. So again, think about what you're trying to do, but then think, will this moratorium solve the problem, if it is a problem? And the answer is no. Neither the moratorium nor things you could put into effect after this are going to change this situation. It's a reality of the market. Next, please. This is our request. We ask that you keep this important tool of special use permits. There's no reason you have to wait 6 months while you think about changes you can make. You can think about those changes while people are applying. If you don't like the applications they make, then you say no. And in fact, I think it would help you in figuring out what changes need to be made, if any, to see what sort of changes people are asking for. We ask that you amend the proposed moratorium. So I would ask one of you to motion to exclude Section 2 from the proposed moratorium. Proposed moratorium. Or at the very least, allow Richard to finish his applications that were stopped halfway through. Allow him to proceed with his special use applications for 200 South Liberty Street and 310 West Green Street. Thank you for your time.
Council, any questions at this point in time?
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else present that would like to speak in opposition?
Shorty. But I'm a realtor, and I'm here to represent a property owner. And my name is Judy Sanders. I live at 300 Coal Branch Road, Edenton, Georgia. Anyway, the property owner, her dad owned a property at the corner of Irwin and Montgomery. And I don't believe it's in the historic district. If it is, I don't know anything about that. And I asked her, and she said no. But anyway, it was his filling station. And then when he passed away, he gave it to her. I think later on it was the chicken shack. But it's only 0.38 of an acre. And I've been trying to sell it for 5 years. It's too small to be a filling station. It's too small to be a convalescent home. There's nothing in the area. Next door to it is many apartments that belong to Jimmy Adams. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that. So anyway, I have an offer to purchase the property after 5 years. It's contingent on getting it to be a multifamily property. It's for $55,000. It's not a lot of money, but to the owner, it's a lot of money, and she'd like to not be paying taxes on it. And actually, I've had it listed for so long that I've tried to sell it, and one day I called down to zoning, and they said, everything multifamily is selling, so change it to that. So I called her and told her, and she ran down there. And I don't know if that's about the time they put the moratorium on, and I guess the moratorium's already been on for 6 months, I guess. And I don't know. We asked about a study. I haven't seen any study that's been done, and I don't know what 6 more months is going to do, especially for my property owner, because she just has this little piece of property that it's got concrete laying out there. It's an eyesore. I think it would behoove the city to have it sell. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. Am I too loud?
No, you're fine.
Okay.
Just trying to figure out exactly
Yeah.
where you're talking about.
Yeah.
Well, I have a little map here. I didn't know about. I don't do this. I don't come to council meetings. I do have a map if you'd like to pass it along.
Okay, it's right down that corner when you come up.
There's a church at catty corner from it.
Oh, okay.
What is it?
El Bethel.
Anyway, the guy who's willing to purchase it, he's willing to, remove all this and put up, I think he wants to put up 6 apartments, which he said if it was 5 feet smaller, he couldn't do it. It's just too small for anything else. And I don't know, waiting another 6 months and then maybe being able to do it or not do it. It's not in the historic district. It's next to apartments. I don't know what else to do except say that we would like to see some kind of exception or special use, or I don't know how, because I don't know the political ins and outs of what you call that. But we do have an offer on the table. After 5 years, I'd like to sell it for her benefit. I'm not going to make that much money off of it. Do y'all have any questions? is there some, well, I have a question. Is there some way that, I don't know that I'm against the moratorium as much as I'm against it for just this one piece of property. So is there any way to make, like you could not have it for a couple of days and I could get my application in? I don't know. There's gotta be reason. I think there should be reason in politics.
Matt, would you like to get in on that? Yeah, couple of days.
Couple of days would be good. I don't know. I don't do this, so you guys, I didn't bring a show.
I think that might be deemed not only a special exception, but maybe even special treatment that would probably run along that line. The one thing about this is that a continuation of this needs to be from one part of it to the next and continuing on until the end. In other words, we could not cease it for a few days and then, well, I guess we could, but, you know, probably do anything, but
So do you think that it'll be a continuation again, or
I really can't
And
tell
is
you
it
at
just-
this
is
point
it-
in time because
is the multifamily housing just for the historic district or for the whole city?
the whole city,
Multifamily would be for the whole city.
right.
Well, I appreciate you listening, because I don't know. I don't know anything else to do with this property. I even suggested maybe the city might want to buy it.
We're not in the property business.
You're not in the property
No,
business.
thank you though.
You're welcome.
Anyone else?
Can I make a comment on that? That property is not new. The ordinance is specific to the historic.
Hold on just a moment. Is there any,
That's only for the special use overlay.
It says and, doesn't it? It does say and.
Isn't it a historic district?
if he,
Temporarily suspending all applications for MR1 and MR2 zoning.
There are two sections to it, and the multifamily is citywide.
Right.
The special exceptions, the overlay for group residents, fraternities, and sororities is contained to the
historic.
historic district.
Okay.
okay, anybody else that would like to speak in opposition? Do I have, oh, yes.
My name is Brenda Deal, and I live at 120 Car Station Road, and I'm the owner of the property that Judy was speaking of. And I've had it listed for 5 years, and this is the first time we've had someone to want to put a contract on it. And I don't know a lot about the laws, but I do know that when my dad had it, and it was an operating service station, it was zoned commercial. And then when he closed the service station, it was called,
Chicken Delight.
forget the name of I think it was Chicken Delight. But anyway, he rented the building to them. And I went through all this process of, it's an ex-service station. I spent a lot of money. The city asked me to tear it down because it was abandoned, so I had everything torn down and hauled off. That was pretty expensive. I also went through the environmental department, the EPD, and paid $4,000 to have them come over here, do samples, send the samples in, and get it cleared. I have a letter of clearance and all from the EPD. So I'm on a fixed income, and I can't afford, the taxes on it. They really went up this past year. And I'm just against it because I'd like to sell the property. And that's all I know, to say. So, but I thank you for hearing me.
Thank you. Okay. We have rebuttal? No? Okay. Any questions or comments from members of council?
I do have a question for Mervyn. Approximately how long does it take approximately how long does it take for someone, if they apply for a zoning change? How much does all of that? I know you have to do certain things, so.
We usually say 2 to 3 months. Really, it sort of depends on when they get the application in, if it's at the first or the end of the month. But I think what he was referencing is that what Mr. Sims has done is he has come in and he has applied for the overlay first, which is, say, 3 months there. Then after that, if that passes, then he comes back and applies for a group residence, which may be another 3 to 4 months, to where that process takes anywhere between 6 to 7 months if you're applying for the overlay.
I was actually trying to time that with her contract on her property.
Yeah.
So that's what I was thinking about. How would that work with the contract on property and the time that takes, and then applying for?
Well, the next meeting would be August,
Uh-huh.
and I could take her back before council the first meeting in September.
Okay. That's what I was just thinking about that.
Any other comments or questions?
Just one.
What?
You gonna allow rebuttal?
I guess I am.
I'm sorry. I promised I wouldn't address specifics, but I can't let it go by again.
If you will be brief, sir.
You bet I will. I tried last time. I hope I will be more brief this time. The betterment of the historic district is absolute concern to the entire city. Without a historic district, one that is good for financial ends as well as living, I think is absolutely key to the city. The question of only one person doing this is sort of a two-sided question. Let me explain. Most of those houses on Liberty Street were purchased before they ever went on the market, and anyone else had an opportunity to buy them. I've been through that experience myself with buying those properties, with offers before they even go on the market for that purpose. So that's not altogether correct. There already have been 2 properties authorized as a fraternity and sorority within the overlay area. So that isn't the question. The question is, how many more before it takes over the entire overlay area? And remember, you did a great thing not too long ago when you identified a specific area for fraternities and sororities and multi-use. Easy to do. Come, you get. It's just this area around what you want to preserve as historic district, I think, is a little more sacred. Utilities, houses. I live in one of those houses. Not only a few at 4,000 square feet, but I'm pretty close. I've lived there for 25 years. I do the work too. I insulate them. I pay my utility bills. So yes, it is done. It can be done very easily. But again, many of them did not go back on the market for that sort of thing. You saw a picture, it was devastating, of a fire at 201 South Liberty Street. Let me reiterate or explain that. That's an illegal sorority who plugged in too many hair dryers, et cetera, into electrical system. An unauthorized sorority. So if you'd authorize it or tell them they can't live there, it may not have caught fire. That's a whole different point. The question is it's one of those authorized things that we should have taken care of a long time ago. Complaints. I'm not the only one who complains about certain things. Not all, but certain things. And there are complaints listed with the police department, some with the code office. Not as many as I'd like to give, but some with the code office. For code violations of more than 3 unrelated, and there are many of those. And I guess doing this 6 months that you have a chance to look at it, you may address that very nicely. How are you going to enforce it? Put some teeth into the code in addition to make any relevant changes. I did speak at P&Z, so there was at least one dissenting voice. And one last thing. No one in my district, no one on my street hates students. We do appreciate what Georgia College and Georgia Military College do for this community. What we don't like are students who are disrespectful, students that do not respect their neighbors and do not take care of their property. That's the biggest problem we have. I do have one set of neighbors that are very good. I pay a young man to do work for my house. So it's not a dislike of students. It's a dislike of students who do not respect their community, their neighbors, and their property. That's why I think you need time to take a look at the ordinances. I hope I was brief enough, Steve. Thank you.
Very quickly.
Okay, I appreciate the real estate agent from Eatonton and the attorney from Watkinsville, but I live there, and I invite you all to come see my 5,000 square foot house that we've been renovating since 2008, okay? That we pay the electricity bills, that we pay our taxes on. The things that are being done are not reversible. Once you pour gravel in the backyard, it's a parking lot forever. You cannot turn that back into a house. I have complained to the code office. I have complained repeatedly to the campus police and Milledgeville Police Department. They've got records of me calling them a lot. This moratorium, the Section 2, sounds an awful lot like Ordinance 1305-006. It's a law, a local law that's already there that needs to just be enforced. There's nothing new here, and you all as the governing body of this city can do this moratorium. That's your job. That's what you can vote on that. You can do that. So about the small class of people pays their taxes. They live here. They're not transient. They care about Milledgeville. They care about their kids that live here. They care about their neighbors. And they're not one person with a whole list of properties. They're a small group of people that live here and that care about this city. Thanks.
Before anybody else raises their hand, I'm shutting it down. Any comments?
Yeah.
Questions?
Yeah, let me ask the attorney a question. From time to time, we have people applying for DCA, right, for affordable housing with multi-unit. Would that affect us from approving them?
It would affect them from being able to rezone to
rezone
MR2. Yes.
So now we'll be denying affordable housing if someone that was approving them.
Yes. Okay. I mean, obviously that's a fairly lengthy process. So the next 6 months, unless somebody's already filing for it, next 6 months probably does not play a role in that.
Well, I'm just saying, but
it could.
Based on this right here, we couldn't even approve it, really. Huh?
That's correct.
Yeah, okay.
What is the total length of time that we have had a moratorium in place already?
Since the end of October.
Do we have any sufficient or significant data to reflect our diligence in observing and correcting issues within the district, trying to trying to
Well,
solve
our-
some of these issues?
Yeah, our city planner has put together some information that we can share with you. I believe, as I understand it, that the next step would be to consider hiring a firm to come in and study, very similar to what Carrollton has done, Athens has done, but I know Mr. Jarrett and his staff have been pricing those services to determine who we would like to utilize in order to do that study.
Anybody else?
I think your staff has also, had meetings with owners as well, and that already have, multifamily units in the area too, right? Mhm. Oh. So we do have some information. I've met with some of them myself.
Hank Griffith, our city planner, has a summary sheet that he's going to provide to you. Can go ahead and provide it to you as to what's gone on to this point.
Thank you.
Okay, as I see this, we've got one of two directions to go in. We have some information before us that has been gathered within the last spans of this present moratorium. I guess the question to council that I see, and that I think there's a question to council from members of the public, and that is whether we go forward with it, whether we adjust it, or whether we shut it down. And that's basically what it boils down to. I will say this, that should we extend this moratorium for a period of 6 months, and we can get sufficient information to move forward and feel comfortable with and everything within a 4-month period, that we can always come back and lift that moratorium. One thing that I want to mention is that in looking at this over the last 6 or 8 months and looking at it very closely, I have realized that I personally have looked at it as each individual property development idea, investment, whatever. And it wasn't until I actually stopped long enough to look at total numbers, to look at sometimes getting caught up in the day-to-day operations, that you're not looking from the sky to see the whole picture, that you lose sight of where are we going with this. Planning is a good thing. Sticking to a plan is a better thing. Real life is having a plan and being able to change and adapt with it. Are there any other comments, questions? All right, this concludes the presentation of evidence in this matter. Members of council, you have heard the evidence, the ordinance, and the evidence presented. Do I hear a motion on the amendment?
Motion that we disapprove the amendment.
Is there a second?
Second.
Got a second? We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Or I ask the clerk to call the roll. I want to make sure one more time that everybody knows which way they're voting, because this is a motion denying the amendment.
So a yes vote is to deny the amendment. A no vote is not to deny, will not approve it.
Right.
It'll require another motion, an affirmative motion, if it is not approved.
Okay, say that one more time, if it's
Right.
no.
This is a motion to deny, so a yes vote would be agreeing to deny the approval of the amendment, a yes vote. A no vote would be against the denial. It would then require, under our code, it would then require a second motion to approve,
Okay.
just so you understand. That gets confusing sometimes.
Get me every time.
Confusing, explain.
Okay, everybody clear? Ask the clerk, call the roll.
Dr. Lee,
No.
Ms. Walden,
No.
Ms. Shinholster,
No.
Mr. Reynolds,
Aye.
Mr. Mullins,
Aye.
Mr. Chambers.
All of a sudden, this chair doesn't feel quite as good as it did in the beginning.
There's something about that seat.
But if I am correct in my assessment, a tie would, that it would die. Is that correct?
Yeah, it would require another motion.
Another motion?
But it requires, under our code, it requires 4 of votes to approve,
Correct.
or just, to approve any
Any action?
ordinance.
Chair votes no. Do I hear a new motion?
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion to accept the findings of the Planning and Zoning Board and approve the request.
I second that motion.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, I ask the clerk to call the roll.
Dr. Lee,
Yes.
Ms. Walden,
Aye.
Ms. Shinholster,
Aye.
Mr. Reynolds,
Nay.
Mr. Mullins,
Aye.
Mr. Chambers.
Aye. Motion passes. Move on to new business, and I'll ask the clerk, up, got,
9 more.
back up here for
One
a
more.
second. Still got another ordinance. Thank you, sir. Okay, the final item under old business is consider ordinance 1805-004, adopting the fiscal year 2019 annual operating budget. Has this budget adoption been properly advertised?
Yes, sir, it has been.
I ask the clerk to read the ordinance by caption.
An ordinance to adopt the fiscal year 2019 annual operating budget beginning on July 1st, 2018 and ending on June 30th, 2019. To adopt the 5-year capital improvements program, to make the budget available for inspection, and to outline the adoption schedule and for other purposes.
You've heard the ordinance. Is there a motion to adopt?
Motion to adopt.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Ask the clerk, call the roll, please.
Dr. Lee?
Aye.
Ms. Walden? Ms. Shinholster?
Aye.
Mr. Reynolds?
Aye.
Mr. Mullins?
Aye.
Mr. Chambers?
Aye. Now we'll move on to new business and ask clerk to read resolution 1806-024.
A resolution to reschedule the June 26, 2018 City Council meeting for Thursday, June 28th at 6:30 PM in the council chambers of City Hall due to the Georgia Municipal Association Annual Convention.
You've heard the resolution. Is there a motion to adopt?
So moved. Second.
Have a motion and second. Any discussion? Ask the clerk, call roll.
Dr. Lee?
Aye.
Ms. Walden? Ms. Shinholster?
Aye.
Mr. Reynolds?
Aye.
Mr. Mullins?
Aye.
Mr. Chambers?
Aye. Resolution is approved. There are no alcohol license applications, although I would like a drink right now. And there are no appointments to consider tonight. We need, I'm getting to it. We need to amend the agenda to add resolution 1806-02, is that the correct number?
1806-026.
Yep. 1806-026 to extend the deadline for service delivery strategy. Do I hear a motion to amend the agenda?
So
So
moved.
moved. Second.
Like Lee and
Got it? We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Ask clerk, call the roll.
Dr. Lee?
Aye.
Ms. Walden? Ms. Shinholster?
Aye.
Mr. Reynolds?
Aye.
Mr. Mullins?
Aye.
Mr. Chambers?
Aye. I'll ask clerk to read the resolution by caption.
A resolution to approve an extension of the deadline to review and revise the existing service delivery strategy until September 30th, 2018.
Heard the resolution. Do I hear a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Ask clerk, call the roll, please.
Dr. Lee?
Aye.
Ms. Walden? Ms. Shinholster?
Aye.
Mr. Reynolds?
Aye.
Mr. Mullins?
Aye.
Mr. Chambers?
Aye. Any further business? Hearing none, we are adjourned.